my cats are my kids, and I don't like actual human children. A couple of disclaimers. I'm not an authority or an expert. I am a biologist, but I don't like birds. So I don't know a lot about them. Please do not ask me a lot of technical bird questions after this presentation. I do provide some sources, mainly just for the pictures and where I found them. So you can reach out for more information, but a lot of this is just anecdotal. A lot of it is also, because of the time when this happened, it's very difficult to find like the source information. And what I can find often contradicts everything else, so. And these views are mine and mine alone. They do not represent those of Nite, my employer, who likes people to say that when they present things. And I'm probably the only person on earth that's still mad about this. So the year is 2002. I was a freshman at Drake University, that's in Des Moines, Iowa. I was very close until I think probably late June. I was going to KU. I'd already paid all my deposits and then just kind of changed my mind. If you went to high school in Kansas, you know that KU and K-State end up being like high school again, and I just kind of changed my mind. I didn't want to do that again, which was a good call because my best friend flunked out. And so what Drake does is for all incoming freshmen, they're required to take a first-year experience class. And you get no choice in what the experience you get is. But it's supposed to help you meet people. So the first year experience that I was assigned to was about Lewis and Clark and their expedition, which I knew nothing about and was not at all excited to take the class. History is not my thing. But it actually ended up being very fascinating. Looking backwards now, I realize it was a very one-sided history of Lewis and Clark. But it was taught by Dr. Richard Waka, who was obsessed with Lewis and Clark. I think he has since passed. The Drake University Biology Department was all very old white men, so none of them are with us now. I remember a few things from this class. The main thing, my party anecdote, is that the fox squirrel, the eastern fox squirrel that, I think you have gray squirrels here in Lawrence, but it's more in Topeka, they have the fox squirrels, which are a little more red. Their Latin name is Sciurus niger, and that's because Lewis and Clark collected the first specimen and it had a genetic mutation. I don't think it was melanistic, I think it was just a change in its fur color, but it made it black. So the first specimen that was collected was black in color, so they named it Sciurus niger. Fascinating. I'm great at parties. Another thing, only one person in the expedition died. Only one person from this side of the expedition died, and he died of appendicitis before they really even got started. So the rest of the expedition did survive. The expedition for Lewis and Clark started from Thomas Jefferson telling them to go west, find passage west, collect or create maps, but also collect specimens of biological plants, animals, just kind of whatever they can find. And they discovered all of those things. Even though they've been around forever, everyone who was native to the area knew about them, but Lewis and Clark discovered them. But one thing about this class that I really remember is that being told that at one point, some kid went outside and shot the last passenger pigeon, the last one known to be alive in the wild, with a BB gun, even though it was known that they were nearing extinction. So it wasn't a surprise, they knew it was gonna happen. What I don't remember being taught in this class is anything from the perspective of the other side, native populations. And there are books about this, and I probably should read one, about how they observed this expedition moving west and how it affected them. You have two populations, this is obviously before modern medicine, who are interacting with each other, introducing each other to pathogens, culture changes. A lot of what happened between the white settlers from the east and the native populations started here. Some of it started here. The French were here first in this area that we're going to be talking about. Different countries came through, but for the Americans, we definitely started to decimate the populations pretty early. So we're going to be talking about Ectopistes migratorius, just say it fast with confidence, which is the passenger pigeon. This is their kind of known region to exist. I guess the red means they were really dense there. Wikipedia. It's also known as the wild pigeon. It was the most abundant bird in North America and possibly the world at the time. It fed on nuts, small berries, invertebrates such as bugs. And one important thing is that it would roost in very large groups. So we'll get a quote a little bit later, but it's not great when large portions of your population are all sitting in the same spot. Predation, it's pretty easy for them, even if the predators are human. Basically, it was a pigeon. It looked like a pigeon, acted like a pigeon. It was a pigeon. I don't care about the pigeon. That's not what I'm mad about. Early observations of passenger pigeons, Lewis and Clark noted them in their journals. The book that we used that I pictured a little earlier, it was a look at their journals, but it was also additional discord and discussion about their journey as a whole. But they noted the pigeons in Montana. Zebulon Pike, which kind of was the next expedition, he observed the most fervid imagination cannot conceive their numbers. When they are migrating, they could black out the sky for hours. There were so many pigeons. And there were more passenger pigeons at this point than people. And not just white people, all people. They were everywhere. So this is one of the quotes from a newspaper. This is kind of a picture of a hunting party. This was very common back then to have one group of people in the background of this photo would kind of startle the roost, which then all the birds would take flight. And it was said that you could take one shot in the air and hit multiple birds. You could not miss as long as you were aiming where the birds were. So this kind of describes like when they're roosting, how disgusting that area is, but also when you're roosting and the ground is covered with manure, that's part of the ecosystem that provides a lot of different things for invertebrates, carrion feeders for the young or old / dead pigeons. So there's a lot that would contribute to the ecosystem as a whole by having those pigeons there. But then, after Lewis and Clark, problem. So once we start heading west as a whole, we're gonna kill it, we're gonna eat it, and then we're just gonna keep moving west. As the railroads progressed, we hear all the time about bison and how bison were decimated almost by the railroads. Well, passenger pigeons were the same. They're removing all the trees in the way of the railroad. They're creating cities around the railroad, and that means they're getting rid of a lot of trees. And so because the pigeons would roost so heavily in like one tree or one area of trees, it really took care of their population pretty fast. So this is kind of an end of the era. This is the anecdote that I heard. This is what made me mad about this. And actually the first nerd night I came to, I think was in 2012 or 2013, maybe 2014 time. It was a while ago. It was when I first got back to Kansas. And so I've been wanting to talk about this since then, just stewing. But the most famous anecdote is that a young man named Press Stallworth shot the last live specimen in his backyard in Ohio in 1900. And then some reports said he used a shotgun. This is that bird, so I really feel like a shotgun is not what happened. But also, I don't know anything about guns. So his mother actually exclaimed, "Oh my God, I think that's a passenger pigeon." So they actually preserved him. His name is Buttons, because his eyes are buttons, apparently. I don't know. And that he was the last confirmed wild specimen. So the way you would confirm a wild specimen is to kill it and preserve it. So actually they were later observed in the wild in Maine, 1904, Kansas, 1905, and actually Teddy Roosevelt observed them in Virginia in 1907. But these observations were like, oh, there's a bird, there's a passenger pigeon right there. Again, they look like pigeons, it could have been anything. So the last confirmed specimen would have been in 1900. But breeders kept pigeons in large numbers. Pigeons, I'm sure a lot of you know this, because they have great genetic diversity amongst the populations of them, they like to breed them to like bring out different traits. And so there were a lot of breeders that had small amounts or small populations of their own of passenger pigeons. And then of course zoos, thoughts, it's fine. A lot of zoos had passenger pigeons. The last passenger pigeon, this is after all of the breeders have lost their populations. The last one would be Martha, also in Ohio. She's dead in this picture. You can tell because it says extinct behind it. She was the last living female. She had multiple male mates. They all died before she did. But she died in 1914, and she was in storage for a while. But is currently on display in the Smithsonian Museum. One of the interesting things about Martha is this is the first species to be so clearly documented that its decline in population as well as its extinction. They haven't been seen since then. And so it's a well-documented decline. We know the day and even the time that this species went extinct. So, interesting. But you might have noticed in the news recently, this is pretty new, September 19th, the thylacine, or the Tasmanian tiger, they recently brought them back into the news because this is actually, these are the last two specimens. One of them died, obviously, and then there was just one, but then it died. So the thylacine was actually targeted to be hunted by the government in Tasmania. I couldn't really find a reason why. Maybe they just didn't like them. They look cute. I don't know. But they intentionally hunted them to near extinction, and then continued expansion ended up decimating that population. The last known specimen died in a zoo in 1930. I hate zoos. I know they do some good, but they do more harm than good. But especially back then, they just did a lot of harm. You can see this as their actual habitat. It's all concrete, and all this stuff on the ground is where food was just thrown at them. They weren't fed by the zoo. People could just throw things at them. They look really skinny, probably because they don't like what they're getting thrown. So this is a Tasmanian tiger. So I don't know if you took a mammalogy class, but when you preserve a specimen, you skin the specimen, you eviscerate it, you remove all of the interior portions, including the bones, which are great sources of DNA. That goes in the trash. It's just the skin. And then they stuff it with sawdust and cotton, fake eyes, they sew it up, they put a little like toe tag on it. That's a preserved specimen. So they were actually able to gain an RNA sample from a preserved specimen. So they probably took a cutting of the skin of the preserved specimen. These are stored dry, like in desiccant. So they're kept dry. They're not like the, mad scientist formaldehyde beaker. So they got an RNA profile. The thing about RNA is it's not DNA. And as a DNA analyst, this is the one thing in the presentation I know something about, kind of. But DNA doesn't do a lot. It's like a recipe for something. It's like the blueprints. We always call it the genetic blueprint. So it's not doing much. What does all the work is RNA. There are so many different kinds of RNA that are building proteins, creating different structures within your body, within the environment. RNA does all the work. And they have the RNA. They don't have the DNA. So they just kind of fill in the gaps. So the question is this something that we could do maybe with a passenger pigeon? There are a lot of things to take into consideration. One is that no scientist actually believes in reintroduction of extinct animals of any kind. It's not scientifically robust, and it's for multiple reasons. De-extinction, not a real term, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. When you reintroduce something, you're introducing what is now an invasive species. It will have a huge effect on the ecosystem in which you're introducing it to. Its place is gone in that ecosystem. It's completely gone. So these are some invasive species. The Burmese python, they're having a lot of problems with that in like Florida, kind of down in the Everglades area. The zebra mussel, I think that's in Kansas now, just because people don't want to, like, I guess, clean off their boats before and after they go in the water. The cane toads, I could do a whole presentation on cane toads and that disaster. And that's based on an almost porno-like film that I saw in the 9th grade. But those were introduced in Australia, and hilarity ensued. But they're overrun with cane toads. So the question is, should we do this? Should we do this? We're already doing it. So there are multiple different projects in place, Revive and Restore, the Passenger Pigeon Project, that are trying to reintroduce passenger pigeons to whatever ecosystem they want to throw them into. The problem is, and I couldn't find anywhere where they said they actually had DNA or RNA from a passenger pigeon. So what they do when they have like the RNA from the thylacine is then they take a very close genetic relative of that, and they take that close genetic relative's DNA and then just kind of try to make the RNA work. So the pigeon they've picked out for this, because it's a pigeon, is the band-tailed pigeon. It's pretty close. I mean, they look the same. But this is the plan. For both of these projects that I found, the plan is to use band-tailed pigeons to reintroduce the passenger pigeon. The problem being, remember, they are very destructive to any area in which they're in. So when you think, going back to the cane toads were introduced, and then they had to keep introducing other animals to kill what other animal they introduced before that, which would eventually kill the cane toads. So then they just end up killing off huge numbers of the population, which is what they might have to do with passenger pigeons if it gets out of hand. The problem is they would be introducing a bunch of pigeons from the same gene sequence, so there would not be a lot of genetic diversity, which is bad. They would probably go extinct again anyway. So what lessons have we learned about reintroducing animals, or, I don't know, focusing on animals that we still have and trying to get them to not go extinct? We have learned literally nothing. And when I was researching this particular PowerPoint, I was really trying to find some hope. None. There's no hope. These are animals that might actually go extinct within our lifetime. Even the really cute ones. Look at this guy.
What is that?
It's a pika? Pika? I don't know. It's pika. Yeah, it's just like a little rock rodent. Well, there aren't a lot of them, so why would you know? But so really the point of my presentation is that we really need to think ahead about our plans. Ian Malcolm was right. Like, if it had its time and it's gone, reintroduction is not a good idea. I can't think of a single good example of reintroducing something that is destructive to an environment and that ending well. I mean, yes, they have reintroduced, or not reintroduced, but they have added additional populations of animals that are not extinct, and that has been great conservation, making a more robust population, but it doesn't work if the population is gone. So instead of focusing what I assume is a lot of money from white people on stuff like this, maybe we should focus on what we can work with. And some of these animals, honestly, it's too late. But I mean, some people are saying it's too late for humans, so, but yeah. So are there any questions regarding the passenger pigeon?
I thought the California condor went extinct in the wild.